Welcome to the Mavericks podcast. In this episode, we're going to be tackling the second topic that I want to tackle with healthy confrontation. This one is more from an internal perspective and involves really addressing how you feel and what kind of holds you back in any situation, really, especially when it comes to communicating with other people. So this one is called internal confrontation, and this one, this topic specifically, is something that I struggled with for a very, very long time, and it's something that actually I think initially started my journey down the road of confrontation and why it is important to be able to face those things in public and obviously internally. So, to start off, I want to talk about why internal confrontation is important, or at least the way that I see it. Internal confrontation. Wow. Okay. Internal confrontation is the process of your truth coming to reality. It's about how you feel or what you feel to be true in a situation. It's a piece of you urging to come out into the light, basically. Now, to really internalize the idea, it's basically if you have something on your mind, speak it. You never know how many lives you're going to change by doing that. And I say this because as soon as I realized that if I spoke my mind more and more often, I realized that I started making a difference in people's lives with the way that I spoke and the different perspectives that I introduced into a situation that people often didn't see or didn't notice. And maybe that's just me, but again, I would have never figured those things out if I didn't decide to speak them out into the world or out into a situation where I was feeling like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say this, or I felt like it was a good idea, but I decided, you know what, I'm gonna take a step back in this situation and just let it see how it plays out. Everyone has a moment when they feel like they have something to add to a conversation, whether it's to speak to add information or to voice heart or concern. In this case, we have what we call the push, which is the very first step of this process. And the reason I call it the push is because it's an initial push from your body, from the internal parts of you that's like, hey, this is something that's on your mind. Like boom, just an initial push. And it's not anything crazy, especially if you have a really big habit of ignoring it, which I did for a long time. Is as soon as that voice comes in up that says, this is how I think about this situation, then there's immediately some pushback saying we don't need to add that, or our voice isn't important enough for them to hear and it's not necessary, so we just cut back on it. And I've actually seen a lot of people go through this, and it hasn't been just me. So talking about the push is the first honest and subtle reaction to the situation. This is the moment your truth begins to emerge out of your consciousness and wants to have a chance to play, we'll say. So a chance to get involved and be able to really test the situation, test the waters. So for why, this is what I wrote for the push. When you get that subtle nudge to speak, you feel a gentle push towards speaking what you feel. When talking about the push, we're talking about when you are in a conversation and it is leading down a certain way or a certain path, but then you feel a small urge to insert your own input. This is what I'm calling the push. The moment you feel compelled to speak. This moment can be super small or even bring about extreme tension to the situation internally. Every truth has a different magnitude of meaning to you. The bigger, the more compelled you are to speak. But no matter what you are, sorry, but no matter what, you are still focused. Uh-oh. Oh. But no matter what, you are still faced with the next step, whether or not you choose to speak about it or speak out on it or not speak out on it, sorry. Which this is the pull. The reason I call it the pull is because this is when internally your mind is like, well, is it even worth speaking about this? Like, you have your idea and it's coming out, it's pushing. And you're like, okay, do I want to, this is my truth and this is what I feel about the situation, whether it's frustrated or whether it's really strong, like, I contest to that idea. So you have that's your pull. Then you have the push, which is kind of like, whoa, hold on there, buddy. Do you really want to say that? Is this really something that you want to bring out into the world and leave it on the table, right? So do you really want to play that card? So it's that internal voice that's kind of pushing you back. Now, in my opinion, or in my experience, I have noticed that when it's an actual serious conversation and you're trying to get somewhere with the truth, or let's say when someone's sharing their truth per se, and you're also doing the same, I've noticed that in that case, you really do want to be able to speak that truth, whatever you feel to be true, whether it's your emotions or a different perspective that you might have. So, in those situations, I've noticed that when I do decide to speak up and speak what I feel to be true, the conversation actually goes to a much more positive route rather than, you're saying something and then I'm just sitting there listening, just kind of like this with a glare in my eyes, because there's a glare and people who's watching it, at least, there's a big old glare in my right eyeball, left eyeball. Anyways, I got sidetracked. So, excuse me. With this, you want to be able to get to a position in your life where you feel like you can share that truth, especially if it's a big thing and it's something that bothers you. Like if someone has said something that you don't feel is positive to you. Like I've had some situations where someone says something about me and internally I'm like, well, I didn't realize you thought that about me. Or someone snaps. I've had a situation where a friend of mine says something and I don't really know how to describe it, but like kind of a smart ass comment, I guess. I don't know how any other way to say it. And I noticed it, and this was actually before church, and I'm like, why did she feel the need to be that way, you know? And as the service goes on, this is an instance where I chose not to speak immediately, which can be good sometimes, obviously, because you want to be able to sit on it and be like, well, why did this really affect me? And then be able to bring it up later in the conversation or later in the day to the same person. And towards the end of the service, this was at church, I told myself, I was like, hey, that really bothered me. I think I should speak up about it and tell her, like, hey, the way you worded that and the way that you said that made me feel like you were undermining me and saying that basically I'm a smartass, or I think I know everything when I don't, or when I don't feel like I do, in that kind of way, in this specific situation. So I decided after the service, I was like, okay, I'm gonna talk to her about this. And I went up to her and I was like, hey, this specific thing you did, it really bothered me and it rubbed me the wrong way. And I just want to clear it up so that I'm not thinking about it. And I mean, you might not have thought it meant much, but in my situation, I felt like it was a twisted view of me that I didn't really agree with. And because we're friends, I want to be able to settle this with you. So it's kind of, if you look at it from the outside in, that's kind of the idea behind it. So with that, that's to summarize what the pool is. It's really, you have what you want to say. Now you have to decide. Excuse me. Do I want to say it or do I want to hold it in? In some situations, it might be better to hold it in because you also don't want to bring problems out that aren't necessarily like a lot of things that pop up in my head. I decide, I'm like, is this really going to matter that much later on the line? And if the answer is no, then I'm like, well, it's not really a problem then, is it? Because if it's not going to be there, if it's not going to be like really strong lasting effect on the relationship or anything, and it's just your mind being like, well, that's weird, why'd that happen, then sometimes it's honestly better just to be like, okay, well, it's not a problem, so just forget about it. And I tend to do that as well. So there's both sides. I'm not saying that you should always speak your mind and always speak what you feel to be true, or in those situations, like, you still want to think about it, you still want to think it through and make sure that it would be a good thing to talk about, especially if it's a relationship between you and the person and you want to make sure that that relationship stays solid and you don't want it to disperse or get worse. So I would say that in those situations, yeah, definitely go speak. But in some situations, especially if it's just a slight comment that someone makes and you're like, oh, that was weird, sometimes it's better just to decide it's not a problem. And that goes with a lot of things in life, honestly, because the less things that you feel like are a problem, the easier it is to move forward. So that's why I say it's kind of it's situational and also based on the person, whatever does bother you or doesn't bother you. So that's why I say in the pool, PULL, not POL. In the pool, this is when you're kind of like, well, I have this urge to speak, but should I really say it? And you really want to be able to measure. It's like, well, would it be a good thing for me to say, or would it not be a good thing for me to say? And you want to just kind of sit on it for a minute. And sometimes some things go faster, some things don't. I've worked on the muscle long enough where if I feel like there's a truth that needs to be said, I'm going to say it. And the only reason that I've reached that conclusion is because I've done it long enough and consistent enough. I've figured out that when I do speak like that, it opens the door for a really amazing conversation between two people or between multiple people, especially in like a group setting where I've had, let's say, men's group that I go to. I've had situations where, like, you know what, I'm just not going to speak. And then people will ask for input, and eventually they'll be like, hey, Maverick, what do you think? And then I start speaking, and then usually something good happens. And that's also kind of reinforced me speaking a little bit more, because I've noticed that when I do start to speak, and I do start, especially sensitive topics or deeper topics, it's always a new perspective, and people tend to be interested in that. It's a new perspective. Like, okay, well, what can this person add to the situation, and will it add something that is beneficial and that changes me towards a better version of me, right? So it's a back and forth, but I've noticed more and more as I do it in my situation, speaking up that truth, it allows for a lot more growth than just holding something in. But again, it's up to you. It's one way or the other. Then we move on to step 3, which is the freeze. And I think I wrote something pretty good on this paper about it, so I'm gonna get to that, and then we'll talk about, let's see, back to the pool. It also helps you connect with people. That's another thing. Especially when you start speaking the truth, especially sorry, when you include your feelings and you're vulnerable with those situations, it really does improve communication and connection with people. And I think that's very, very valuable. The more people you can connect with, the better. And being vulnerable and speaking out your feelings and how you really feel definitely opens up that door more effectively and gives you those opportunities to really connect with people. Anyways, the freeze. What is the freeze? This is when you have realized all the possible ways you could express what you're feeling or make the decision to keep it in. The decision between the certainty of knowing, this decision between the certainty of nothing having an impact because you chose not to speak, or the uncertainty of sharing your truth, trusting that the truth really does set you free. Which one is the better decision? That is for you to decide. In my experience, choosing to express how I feel truly has led me to the best possible outcomes I could have never imagined could have happened. This is a big impact. So, just to readdress, we all know that as humans, as people, we go through situations in our head constantly, especially if there's a situation that's heavy on your mind. And that's why I say we go through all the realized possible ways that something or a conversation can go. And in my experience, for one, we have the spotlight effect, right? So everything in your mind is 10 times worse than it actually is. So that's comforting, because then that means you've already thought of the worst possible outcome. It can only get better from there. So, boom, that sets the bar like, the bar's pretty low. That means you can get better than whatever you're thinking in your head, especially if it's in a negative aspect. So that's already positive. And then we also honestly forgot the second point I was going to make. And interesting. And my drink got cold or warm too. So we also have that. But along with the fact that we make everything worse in our heads, we also have like this isolation as well. And the more we get in our heads, the more we're stuck in our heads, the more we don't want to talk. And then you just kind of internalize everything, and we don't really want that. And that's where that tension builds up and really pushes you away from people in general. And I've noticed that throughout my life is the second I start getting that isolation urge to just back away and be like, hey, I don't want to do anything with anybody, leave me alone. The second I get to that point, I'm like, okay, this needs to change, because for one, I come from a place where I didn't talk much and I was never really involved with people. And as I've gotten older, I've realized it's more comfortable for me, but I don't really get energy from it. It actually drains me, if anything. And I've realized over time that I'm more extroverted than someone who just slides away from a situation and is like, okay, I don't want to do this. Or when I'm around people and I stop thinking, I feel great. I feel amazing. And then the more people I talk to, the better I feel. So that isolation thing, and especially now, when I'm in a situation, I'm like, okay, let me just go away, back away. If I can get myself out of that initial stage, I actually feel a lot better afterwards, because the more people I end up talking to, the better. And the more excited I get, the more energetic I feel. And I just go home feeling amazing, right? So that's one thing, or that's another thing to add on to that. And as far as the best decision, like I said, choosing to express how you truly feel really does lead to the best outcomes possible. And the reason I say that is because, you can say, well, what if they react negatively to it? And my answer to that would be, well, if someone's reacting negatively to how you really feel, they're probably not someone you want to be around, because then it's just someone who's just going to shut you down. And we don't really want that, right? We want to be able to just express how we are and be comfortable being ourselves. And that allows us to really hit our potential, or at least gets us started towards that path, right? So if they don't take it well, then you found out another person that you probably shouldn't really spend your time around, because they're obviously not valuing who you are and your time, because how we feel is part of who we are. It might not be true about the situation, but it is true to you. And that's something that needs to be addressed, because while your feelings aren't always true, and what I mean by that is, and this is something I talked about in my forgiveness episode, is your feelings about the situation are true, but the feelings doesn't define what the situation is, which means situationally, those feelings don't define what actually happened, but those feelings are true to you. So if someone can't take in what you're feeling and be able to understand that that's how you feel, it might not be true about the situation, but it is how you feel, and then address that, then they're probably not people you should hang around, because a lot of people are like that, honestly. But if you can find people that really will take that in, understand it, and then reverse it, like understand, like, hey, I understand this is how it happened, but let me tell you my side. And then if you can collaborate like that, which is why I love talking the truth and speaking the truth now, is because it does really reinforce that. So the more you speak what you feel to be true, and it really invites other people to come and collaborate with you, and then that's when the really, really good conversations come out. Because then, excuse me, then it's just you're going back and forth with the truth, with what you feel to be true, and those situations are just amazing. I mean, I love them. They're my favorite things to go through. So once you decide whether or not you're going to speak, and again, we can go back and be like, this, I mean, just try it. Like, what you feel to be true in a situation, just try speaking that to someone, and then try and go back and forth and collaborate. Like, I understand it might not be true, but this is how I felt about the situation. And then see, especially in a situation with a significant other or something, or a boss, just try it and see what happens. Honestly, I mean, in order to do this, in order to really face the truth, you have to be able to let go of the outcomes. And that's something that's really hard for a lot of people, because it means you don't know what's going to happen next. But I would argue that it's really nice not to have to worry about what is going to happen next, and that you trust that the truth will, in this case, set you free and allow you to really move forward in life. And that's one of my base core beliefs, it, like, internally, personally. So then finally, we have the decision. This is where you decide whether or not you will share what you feel. It could be unimportant, but you want to share, or very important, so it needs to be shared. And also, like, that's just both extremes. There's also other extremes to it as well. So it could be something very, very close to you, and something you feel very strongly about. And in that situation, maybe you want to speak to someone about it and get it off your chest, and just be able to feel heard for once. Or if you think about it in other ways, maybe it's something that's unimportant and a really funny joke, but maybe it's bad timing. Maybe it's not bad timing. Maybe you just speak it out and everyone laughs, and then we keep moving forward. Sometimes a well-placed joke is honestly a really good way to move a situation, move a conversation forward. And I have not really been doing that in these, but this is something, I mean, it's all really close to my head. I spent a lot of time writing these things out, and I really want to get these across, because I feel like it can help. So anyways, there's many different combinations of how to evaluate if you should speak, or if you should hold it in, or forget about it, I guess. I wouldn't, if it feels like you're holding it in, just speak it, honestly, because we don't want that tension to build up. That's the whole point of this kind of conversation that we're having. The best way for me to decide is whether or not it would build up internal tension, which is literally what I just said, actually. That kind of tension is never beneficial. It always bites at you until it's released. In my case, I would later approach the person I felt the tension with and try to address my feelings and what was bothering me. So essentially, if you're starting to feel that tension and it's building up and it's building up and it's building up, and you're like, I don't know if I want to do this, or this guy really said something and it really bugged me. If you get to that point, you should probably figure out when and how you're gonna address it to that person, unless you're never gonna see them again. And if you're never gonna see them again, just learn, like, understand that, hey, I'm probably not gonna see this person ever again, and understand what's bugging you and see if you can figure out a way to find peace in that. And um, I would say to go look at the forgiveness episode that I did have, because we did talk about a lot of different topics around forgiveness and releasing tension, that kind of tension. And one of the topics we did talk about was, when you don't see that person again, what are you going to do? And how are you going to deal with that? Because sometimes we won't be able to see that person again, or sometimes we won't be able to put in that situation again. So we need to learn how to address it internally as well. Moving on from that, if you're feeling that internal tension, see if you can figure out a way to get it across to the other person. And even if that other person is you, write to yourself. And I've noticed a lot in my life that when I decide to do that, everything changes. And it's scary, I guess, at first. But the more you do it, it's kind of like a muscle. You just get used to it. And I've learned to enjoy it more and more every time I do it. And it's led to a lot of different connections, a lot of cool people that I've met from doing that, and just really helped me in life personally. And I feel like it can help a lot of people if people understand, like, your voice does have power, your voice does have a purpose. You don't need to shut it out. And so many people have figured that they should shut their own voice out. And I'm here to tell you that's not the case. We all have a voice for a reason. We need to start speaking it and speak what we feel to be true, because that's the only way that we're going to make progress. True progress, especially out in the world. We all have truths. We just need to learn to speak them. And in the process of doing that, we learn more truth. With that being said, thank you guys for joining on this episode. It's about 30 minutes long, just like the last. Next one will be part 3, hopefully, to finish this all out. And this is when, a little sneak peek, this is when we're actually frustrated. And this one took me a little bit longer to put together, because it does require internal detail and external detail. So it's kind of mixing the both. And it's a good topic as well. With that being said, I will talk to you guys in the next one.